Well, I am very pleased to welcome Dr. John Ryan, and I will go ahead and start with a short bio. Dr. John Ryan is a board-certified physician, energy healer, speaker, and visionary. His life was transformed by a series of mystical events that led him to discover the validity of a spiritual and energy-based healing paradigm, his passion. In recent years, his work has led him to the mystical threshold of the quantum basis of DNA, its integral connection to the human spirit, and the potential of this awakening knowledge to support human evolution. His goal is to bring this information down to earth so everyone can benefit from the emerging knowledge available in this awakening time. He is the author of The Missing Pill and founder of Unity Field Healing, a quantum process of conscious DNA activation. So welcome, Dr. John Ryan. So happy to have you here for the interview.
It's truly my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we will be talking about your amazing book, The Missing Pill, Unity Field Healing, and why this is a remarkable time to be alive.
Okay.
And just to give for the audience a little quick introduction to the topic, in this time together, we will discuss the evolving paradigm of energy and consciousness-based healing in this remarkable time of planetary transformation. We will explore the emerging concept of quantum DNA and learn about a new energy modality that was given to Dr. John in a series of meditative visions now known as Unity Field Healing. Dr. Ryan has been told that this work draws upon healing wisdom that dates back to ancient Lemuria and is returning to human consciousness to support human beings walk both for healing support and to walk through this transition with greater ease and grace. What a wonderful topic. Very excited.
Thank you. I look forward to talking to you about it.
All right. So to start out, for our listeners who are new to your work, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, Jocelyn, I have a two-pronged background, I guess. So first of all, I'm a physician. I'm a board-certified specialist and an associate professor of diagnostic imaging here in Canada. And I've been a physician for over 25 years, and I still work in a traditional medical environment. But during that same period of time, I've also been catalyzed, if you will, or awakened to a whole other aspect of healing through a series of personal experiences that I lived. And years ago, I began to live what I now call a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. I began to have energetic experiences in my body and unusual experiences of seeing energy and things of this nature. And I didn't quite understand what I was living back at that time, but through research and, with the curiosity that it invoked by having these experiences, I began to research what might be happening. And I learned about Kundalini awakening, and this opened my mind and my experience to understanding the energetic basis of reality. And the pathway that unfolded from there was the understanding of being able to heal through both an understanding of energy and conscious application to energy, and what would really best be described as a spiritual paradigm of healing, because it calls upon our spirit or our inner consciousness in that type of work to help us heal as human beings. And so over the years, I've done a lot of energy work of different kinds with people and consciousness-based healing. And then in my own personal meditations in recent years was given the gift of several spiritual visions, if you will, that showed me about the reality of what I refer to now as quantum DNA, and being able to work within this structure of DNA that each one of us holds as an integrated spiritual being, and applying that into the energy paradigm so that people can work with this knowledge and this energy experience to help them heal and move forward in their lives.
Wow. All sounds very powerful. And so you are the author of the wonderful and acclaimed book on energy healing called The Missing Pill. What is the core message in your book?
So The Missing Pill is, it's a sizable volume. It's a 500-page book. But the real purpose, I guess, or essence of The Missing Pill is that it's a consciousness primer. And so as I began to work with people energetically over the years, I found every time I wanted to recommend knowledge or information, I would have to recommend another book or another trip to the bookstore. And there was the information that people needed to really ground themselves in energy-based healing was not consolidated or clearly explained by any book that I came across. So I was a little frustrated by this, I guess, in my own experience. And they always say necessity is the mother of invention, right? And it inspired me to draw together all of these elements so that people could have an umbrella of consciousness, if you will, a book that sits down and provides the foundation of all the things you need to understand to go from knowing nothing about energy medicine or energy-based and consciousness-based healing to having a very solid foundation that would allow you to begin to apply this information in your own personal life. And then the other thing I noticed is that as people did open up to energy-based healing, they began to see a schism between traditional medicine and alternative medicine. And I found myself in an unusual situation because I have a foot in both worlds, if you will, and I have an understanding of the workings of both worlds. And I realized that these worlds are not as at odds with each other as we tend to imagine them to be. In traditional medicine, the goal of most healers and physicians, for example, is really to help people. They put the best of their knowledge and the best of their heart into the care that they provide to people. And within the paradigm of what they know and understand, they do an excellent job. But traditional medicine is missing a whole quotient of understanding that's really important in healing. And there's a much more holistic framework that people have to develop. And it enters into the realm of alternative healing. So people who become interested in alternative healing tend to isolate themselves from traditional medicine and then also feel that their pocket of alternative healing is supposed to be the one-shot answer for everything. And I found that what we really needed was an umbrella that was able to overlook this whole process that's taking place in the transformation of healing and healthcare and be able to see all the bits and pieces, if you will, and how everything really fits together. And there's a paradigm shift that's taking place. When you get the big picture, you can start to understand how all of the pieces fit in, how all of the energy modalities fit in, how spiritual consciousness fits into the picture, the role of traditional medicine and how that can be helpful when you're facing a healing crisis in your life in different ways, and how you really don't have to throw any of these things away. You can integrate them and use them in a way that's appropriate for your own personal experience. So the book was, sorry, that's a long answer, but the book was really meant to be a consolidation of all of this knowledge so that you have that foundation to work with. You can read this book from cover to cover, and then it'll save you years of, visiting the bookstore and thousands of dollars, I think, of volumes of books that, talk about maybe one element of the process. And then with that as a foundation, it opens up the doorway for being able to have a conscious discussion about quantum energy and quantum healing and the reality of quantum DNA, because that's a very unusual and quite an esoteric concept for most people. And you can't just begin talking about it without a foundation of energy consciousness and spiritual consciousness. So the book serves all of these purposes, if you will. That's really what it was designed to do.
Wonderful. And so you have, certainly an amazing perspective on this as a medical doctor and then also an energy healer. So how did you first develop this interest in healing and energy medicine?
So for me, my very first interest, it was never something I sought. I should take a step back. When I was growing up and younger, I never really saw myself particularly as a spiritual person. And I was a good person. I was an honest person. I had a certain code of ethics and morality. And I was raised in a traditional Christian type of an environment where people were just kind and good to each other. So I had that kind of a spiritual foundation, but I didn't really see myself as religious or spiritual in orientation. And I started to have a series of experiences. And at first it started slowly. Like I would have dreams and out-of-body experiences. And I began to realize that consciousness and form are distinct entities. In other words, the consciousness that we hold as a person can leave our body, if you will, and can exist or have experiences in other realms. And then I had an experience when my father died that I talk a little bit about in The Missing Pill, where there was such a mystical and a profound healing during my father's funeral that brought peace to my mother through the experience that endured with her for the rest of her life. And when I saw this event happening, I won't really go into the details of it too much. For people who read the book will be able to read about it and understand the experience. But in essence, what happened was there was a physical confirmation that my father was still with us. And my mother was so appeased by this. It was the first time I saw peace descend upon a human being. Wow. While they're in physical form. Mm-hmm. And it opened my mind to a spiritual reality, because I knew, having lived this experience with my father, that if he was able to manifest, or spirit was able to manifest this comfort for my mother at that time in her life, there's a reality beyond what we know. And this reality is mystical and curious to us, but if we're open-minded to it, we can begin to have experiences that do help us understand it. And then as I settled into this, I started having Kundalini experiences, like I mentioned earlier, and my body would begin to vibrate, and I would do meditations, and all of a sudden my chakra system would open, and I'd feel energy moving up and down my spine, and I'd have all these unusual experiences, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And I was sort of synchronistically or spiritually guided, if you will, to go to this bookstore in town that I knew about that had books on alternative healing and these types of things. And when I went to the bookstore that day, I'm not kidding, I had this experience where I'm looking at the bookshelf, and one of the books literally doubled in size right before my eyes, and the book beside it started glowing. And I was mystified by this. I thought, that can't be. And I went over to see what these books were. And one of the books was a book by Gopi Krishna that talked about the spontaneous awakening of Kundalini energy. And the other book was a book by Lee Carroll, a channeled book, if you will, from an entity called Cryon, that talked about the earth changes and what a special time this is on the planet, and how the earth is being propelled into a transformation. And so I, needless to say, packed up these two books and headed home, and I began to read. And it was through experiences of this nature that it began to open my mind, and I realized there was a spiritual reality and an energy reality that I knew little about in medicine. And because of what was happening to me, I was prompted to explore or learn. And then I began exploring techniques in healing and energy, and I met this incredible healer who I had a session from one day, and I had this unbelievable energetic opening and a release of very, very deep emotions. I had sort of this sense of grief and sadness in my heart, and through the process of this energy work, these emotions came up and they were released. And I had asthma as a child, and after this experience, the asthma completely went away. I began to understand the link between energy and health consciousness patterns, and how by releasing some of these energy patterns, we can free ourselves from certain disease states or illnesses. And then I just continued to learn and continued to, discover spiritual information, and became aware of the transformation that's happening right now on the planet, and how it all fits together, if you will, which is really outlined in the book, as you know.
Great. And yes, I wanted to ask you about that. So I have a quick quote from your book. You said, "I believe we are on the threshold of huge revelations in every field of science and ultimately every system of life." Can you explain what you mean by this and why you say this is happening right now?
Yeah. I think if you look at every spiritual tradition that's alive on the planet, and this includes very fundamental religions or base religions such as Christianity or other religions of that caliber, to native spirituality, to basically every formative spiritual or religious system that exists, all of these systems look at this point in time as a special time. Now, it gets referred to in all kinds of different ways. It gets referred to as the end times, or the end of the planet, the 2012 transformation, for example, in the Mayan prophecies. So there are different spiritual traditions that look at it in different ways. And I think there's been a lot of hype and misinformation circulated around it, because what's not understood is that the planet is going through the end of a time, if you will. Yes, it is the end times, but everything in consciousness and in life functions in cycles, and every ending is a beginning. And if we're ending a certain period of time or a cycle of time on the planet, we're in the process simultaneously or concurrently beginning another cycle. And if you look at the true Mayan prophecies, they recognize that it really wasn't the end times the way that this was put forth in mass media and through movies, these types of things. It was understood to be the ending of a time cycle and the beginning of a new time cycle. Now, in scientific arena, the way that that's manifesting, I believe, is through the quantum understanding that's developing. And in psychological circles, it's manifesting through understanding how consciousness affects life and matter, and how it affects the way we create and manifest things in this world. And these things tie together. We're starting to understand that we're fundamentally spiritual beings. And we've externalized spirit to a great degree. We've always seen God and spirit outside, or we needed a mediator, if you will, to access higher realms of consciousness. But we're at a time now where we're beginning to appreciate, first of all, consciously, and then secondly, experience the truth of the fact that God is within us, and that the world of spiritual reality actually exists within every human being. And God is inside of us. And God is love, and love is inside us as a human being. And as we awaken to this core understanding, this essential divinity that we each carry, it's allowing us to transform life. Because when you start to understand that you have the power of a spiritual presence inside of you, a certain power wakes up, a certain consciousness wakes up, and you learn to take a tremendous amount of responsibility in your life and for what you create in your life. And you also realize that you have the power to transform things that are not appropriate or perhaps suitable for you as a human being. And it stimulates a tremendous force of healing in people's lives. So you can kind of see how from a science perspective, a medicine perspective, a spiritual perspective, all of these things weave together into a story and to an aperture, if you will, or a window that we're passing through right now that's known through the 2012 phenomena or the harmonic convergence and these types of things, where humanity is undergoing a mass spiritual awakening. People are beginning to understand and integrate their innate divinity. They're beginning to take a responsible co-creator role in their life, and they're learning that they can manifest tremendous change and positive change when they do that by understanding their true nature. So we let go of a victim consciousness, if you will, or an inferior complex type of consciousness, and we begin to manifest more powerfully who we really are. And you have to connect with that power to heal. You really have to touch that power to begin to heal, either through consciousness or through energy. When you begin then to understand that the manifest world is an energetic reality, and this is where quantum physics ties into the picture, we begin to understand that everything physical and solid, everything we see, whether it's our bodies, the room we're sitting in, the car we're driving in, the person we're talking to, the things that we can appreciate as a manifest reality, we would see them as very solid and structured. But through science and, just by beginning to understand the atomic nature of life and these types of things, we became aware that everything is really energy. Even if it looks solid and material, it is in essence energetic in its basis. Mm-hmm. And that everything that exists as an energy form has an inner directive of energy that is beginning to be appreciated through quantum physics. So there's an interdimensional world, if you will, of energy. So forces and probabilities that guide what actually manifests or pops out on the screen of life, if you will, or manifests in a more tangible way. So when you appreciate that things are not as fixed and solid as they appear, they're more energy and fluid in their bases, and that you have a spiritual consciousness within you, you begin to put together the bits and pieces that allow you to manifest changes in your life in all ways. This can mean from consciousness patterns or relationships and these types of things, all the way down to healing the physical body in very unorthodox and non-traditional ways. And when this tends to happen in the body, of course, we look at it in medicine as, oh, there's a spontaneous healing or some mystical healing that happened in that person. But when you broaden the screen or the vista from which you view it, you'll realize there is an understanding that can be gained if you look at that in a more open-minded way. Why does that person heal, or why did that person have the capacity to heal and another person did not, for example? You see that. I think it puts clearly into perspective the changing paradigm. When one was old and it operated in a certain frame of reference, and then this new world is opening up, and it's new to us. We don't even know what that world is in fullness yet. We don't quite know what the potentials that will come to us in the new world. But I think the most tangible thing that we can appreciate right now that helps us understand the nature of that world is quantum physics. Yeah.
Wonderful. And it is incredible how we're seeing more and more every year now how, science is backing up these incredible mystical things that are happening. And one thing you talked about in your book was intelligent design, and so how do when a cut heals on our skin, it's like magic, how does that, we don't actually, have a full scientific explanation for why that happens. It's amazing. And, that's the intelligence behind all of it. So I thought that was a beautiful way to talk about it. So what is unity field healing?
So unity field healing is, so actually maybe I'll take a step back before I answer that question.
Sure.
To understand unity field healing, we have to first understand a little bit the concept of energy medicine. So when we begin to look at ourselves structurally, not so much as form, but as energy beings, we begin to realize that the human body and all of the components of human life have an energetic equivalent. And mystical sciences from the East for, thousands of years ago talked about things like the etheric body and the meridians and the chakra system in the human body and the various energy bodies that exist that were tangible or visible to people with clairvoyant vision, or the ability to see into these energy realms, if you will. And we've lost touch with a lot of that knowledge and experience, but people are starting to have these experiences again. So there are people, for example, who do start to see energy bodies or see the chakra system or see meridians, for example, in the human body. And most people don't get to see them, but they can certainly become very conscious of them and learn how to feel them and know that they're real by their own personal experience. The way I often say that to people is, have you ever had butterflies? And of course, everybody has either fallen in love or had some experience that's brought butterflies to their belly. Right. That's really a chakra experience. There's nothing physical in your body that's creating that, but the solar plexus chakra is all aflutter in that moment, and you're feeling the energy of the chakra. Or if you've ever felt an enormous heart opening or love for someone in your family or a pet or any element of life for that matter, you know what it is to feel that open heart chakra or have that experience. And or on the corollary, if you've ever been afraid of something and you felt like you were pulling up your root chakra and kind of disconnecting and trying to escape or get away from an event, you start to see how there's an energetic reality that's part of the human structure. Energy healing begins to utilize this understanding and this knowledge to push energy or to provide energy to help changes take place within the energy system and to create a sense of openness and balance. People can also work with that through exercise and yoga and things like Tai Chi, all these things that open up the energy system in the body in different ways. People can have very profound experiences with energy healing where deep emotional restrictions or patterns that they've carried as an individual that hold them back or hold them suppressed in different ways, or believing in something about themselves that's so limited and untrue, that the energy around these things can be destructured by introducing, an energy that can help move the energy within the body. And a good example of that was what I mentioned earlier, when I had this tremendous heart-opening experience, like all this sadness and emotion that literally came out of my body, and I began to cry, and there were tears that were so deep and profound, like I had never cried like that in my entire life. And I knew it was cathartic. I knew that there was an emotional discharge that was taking place in that experience. So you begin to see how energy medicine has some logic to it, or some reality that can be consciously understood. The DNA work that I've been more recently shown to do kind of enters into another realm of healing. It manifests through energy changes, but the level at which it exists, if you will, is the quantum field of energy that is around the DNA molecule, or part of the DNA molecule. And what I began to understand through different things I've read and exposed myself to, as well as the visions that I've had personally in my own meditations, it showed me that when we're being born as an individual, we carry with us a quantum field of energy that's really part of our soul. And this energy merges with us as a developing human being. And that we carry this energy, this quantum field of energy that's implicit or part of our own DNA molecule with us through our lives. Now that's a very strange thing. It's a strange idea, I realize. But from what I was shown in these visions, that when we are born as a human being, we have a conscious access, if you will, or a connection to all of the knowledge and all of the energy that we have as a soul, in addition to as a human being. So for example, if you believe in reincarnation and you think you've lived many times on the planet, that's, once upon a time that was a strange concept, but a huge number of people, I think perhaps even the majority of people, both in the East and the West, kind of believe this today, because to me, life doesn't make much sense if there isn't more to the story than you're born and you die, and that's all there is to it.
Right.
So when you look at children who are like 2 and 3 years old, and they have these incredible gifts and talents, like they can sing like a bird or play the piano like Mozart, you think, where does that come from? Why do they have that knowledge or that capacity? And if you think akashically, or you think in terms of reincarnation, it would make sense that maybe that soul has had the experience of being a master pianist or an opera singer or something in another lifetime. And they still carry that consciousness or that energy with them into this body or this lifetime. And I think the artistic expressions are the things that bleed over that way the most powerfully. They're the easiest to see. People who are creative in different ways or have masterful skills in science and those types of things, mathematics. We also carry with us energies that I believe are part of our soul's design. So for example, when you're born, you have a certain task, if you will, or a spiritual purpose, or you can, people use different words to express this concept, but you sort of have a spiritual reason for your life. And it may involve healing or learning. It may involve simply having certain experiences, like being a parent or being a physician or being a nurse, or, these types of roles that we play as human beings. And it may have also the purpose, if you will, of overcoming things that we might think of as karmic or restrictive in our consciousness. So say, for example, you have a lot of self-doubt, or you've learned to not believe in yourself, then the challenge of overcoming that disbelief and finding the strength or the power to emerge through that and really become authentic and really who you are might be part of a spiritual design. Mm-hmm. Sometimes illnesses are part of a spiritual design, I believe. Like we bring them with us on purpose, and they're meant to be part of our reality so that we use the experience they help us create to heal things or to gain wisdom or to grow in a spiritual context. When we begin to understand that this quantum field exists as part of our DNA, it becomes possible to use that, I believe, to begin to heal. Because a lot of things that we have within us energetically are things that are related to what you would call akashic experiences or akashic memories. And the best manifestation of this, I think, in our modern day is people who do past life regression work. They'll go into a hypnotic state and remember past lives. And usually what people will remember is an experience that had an incredible emotional charge. It might have been how they were killed or something that happened to them that was either very, very positive or very, very negative. And that there's a big emotion around that. And that emotion may be affecting who they are in this lifetime. So certain phobias and fears and things like that. And when they go through the experience of the regression and they touch that energy and they touch that fear, and yet they learn about their inherent safety and the fact that you don't actually die, even if you thought you died in that lifetime, the emotional charge around that gets released, and it creates a certain sense of freedom or opening for the individual who experiences that. And all of this type of work is touching into this, what I call the quantum field or the quantum DNA. The way that I was shown the work is I lived an experience back in 2003 where I was lying down one day, not specifically in a meditation, I was just relaxing. And in my mind's eye, I began to see a filament of light. And this was like a little dot of light, and it came down from above, and it literally plugged into the top of my head like a cord, like an electrical cord. And it just kind of sat there, and I could feel it was vibrating somehow. And then all of a sudden it popped open. And as it popped open, I could see that it was a double helix, just like the form of a strand of DNA. And I kind of thought, well, that was strange. I didn't quite know what to make of that at the time. It's one of those things that happens you can't explain, so you just have to be with it for a little while. Mm-hmm. And then about 10 years later, I had another experience where I saw a pattern of light come down in my mind's eye, so in my third eye vision, if you will, for people who are familiar with that concept. I saw a point of light come down, and it created a pyramid of light. And then another dot of light emerged down through the pyramid, and a second pyramid opened. And then a third dot of light came down, and a third pyramid opened. And then down through that came another dot of light that expanded into a sphere. And the sphere first of all, was just a ball of light, but then two balls of light formed inside of it. And then inside the smaller spheres, two more balls of light formed. And light began flushing through this structure. It was like a light geometry. It was just sitting there sort of in space, if you will, like on a cosmic backdrop. And it was this scintillating ball of light that looked like silvery starlight. And as the light flushed through the template, it began to move very, very fast. And as it was spinning down through the template, it started to form the pattern of a yin and a yang symbol. And you know when you look at a wheel on a car and it's going very, very fast, and then all of a sudden, if you keep watching it, it's like the wheel starts turning backwards because it's moving so fast forward. It was like it was moving forward and backward all at the same time. And it was this oscillation of light that was creating the appearance of the yin and yang symbol. And the template is the picture on the front of the book. It's when you look at the missing pill, it's the silvery template that's on the cover. Mm-hmm. And so that was that. I had this experience, and again, I didn't quite know what that was all about or what to do with that. I went to Egypt on a tour, which I think when you begin to understand energy and consciousness, you know that when you travel to these power points, and particularly power points that have a personal connection to you as a human soul, they're catalytic. They kind of stir things and wake things up, and they have a healing influence or an awakening influence on us, I believe, personally. When I came back from that trip, I was doing a yoga session one day, and at the end I was lying down in dead man's pose, which I always say to people is my favorite yoga posture of all. And I was laying there just kind of integrating the session, and then this pattern came back into my mind's eye. But this time it took on another life, and it began flushing light that I can only describe as angelic looking. It was this iridescent oranges and purple and greens and colors that I've never really seen on the planet, except maybe in like a silk fabric or something like that. Mm. And as the pattern was doing this, my body began to vibrate. And I was like a marionette. My arms began to fly up and pop, and my head was gyrating, and my legs were popping, and I was going through all these different mechanics of motion. And I knew that something was happening energetically, and I'd had enough experiences in my life to just be okay with the experience, if you will, just to trust it. But I felt like I was being recalibrated. Like it was like I was undergoing energy changes that were adjusting my body or my energy in different ways. So that was fine. And then I just kind of integrated that experience. And about a year later, I had another meditative vision. And in this vision, it was a little different. This time, what I saw first in my mind's eye, it was like I was looking out through the top of my head and I could see the entire cosmos. And down from the cosmos came a galaxy. And you know how when you see a galaxy, there's spiral arms that come out from the center. There's light in the center and then spiral arms. And when I looked in the galaxy that I was seeing, it was like the two arms started to come down. They opened up and I could see them coming all the way down to the planet Earth. And it was like they embraced or wrapped around the planet.
Wow.
And when I looked back, I understood that it was a double helix spiral. When you look at the cosmos or the galaxy, it looks like a wheel with, the arms that radiate from the sides of it. But if you were to look down it in a three-dimensional way, you realize it looks like a double helix strand, just like DNA.
Wow.
And that double helix strand, that DNA patterning, is the fundamental patterning of everything that gets created, all the way from all the way from universal creation of a galaxy right down to the human being and all the animals and things that live on the planet that exist through the mechanism of DNA.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then the next thing that happened was I saw this huge scale DNA, like cosmic in size. It's hard to give it a size because it's kind of a quantum vision. And the DNA was there, and I could see this pattern, this template that I was talking about earlier, inside the DNA. And it began to move around the molecule of the DNA. And as it did it, I joke when I explain this to people sometimes. You know the commercial on TV where all the bubbles come out of the can and they clean your tub and they clean your sink? And everybody wishes they had that in their house.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. And as this thing moved around the DNA molecule, the molecule was being recalibrated or rewired. And when you get spiritual messages, I should explain a little bit. There's often a metaphor or a symbolism in the vision. It's a vision, but it's something meaningful, but it often speaks to you in a way that you can comprehend with the knowledge that you have. So I could see as this template was moving around this big energetic DNA molecule that it was restructuring or recalibrating this molecule. Then I was shown this crystalline staircase that went up to another. It was like if you looked up, it went up to another dimension and you could see through the door, but you couldn't see what was on the other side of the door. And I like to joke again, I was definitely at the bottom of the stairs. I was not at the top looking down, I was at the bottom looking up. So I knew I had a ways to go. And then the picture in my mind refreshed, and a DNA molecule was laying on the stairs like a strand. And I knew that the message in this was the way that you go up to the next octave of vibration, or the way you go to this new dimension, is through your DNA. And so it kind of brought together all the bits and pieces that I needed to understand why I was being shown the things that I was being shown and what I could do with them, if you will. So I began doing energy sessions working with this light template that I call the Unity Field Healing Template. And people began to have remarkable experiences energetically in terms of their healing. And it led to the formation of 3 sessions, basically. So the way originally I was doing it as hands-on healing session, but I wanted to make it available to people because I don't have the time or capacity to do this work hands-on with all kinds of people. So I was prompted to create a meditative experience. So there are 3 sessions, and people simply listen to the audio sessions. The first one is a self-attunement to your own spiritual DNA axis. And the second is an attunement to working with the light template that I just described. And then the third session is working with specific intentional issues that are unique to you as an individual. So, once you kind of line up to work within your DNA and work with the template, you can put in the intention of healing that's personal to you, whether it's something you're living as a health crisis, or a pattern of consciousness that you keep running into in your life, or, something that you're trying to work through in your own spiritual journey or journey of healing in any way. And then you work with the session with that intention, an intentional expression of that healing, if you will, within the session. And then you can repeat the session. You can use it again, but work with a new intention. Mm-hmm. So the third session is kind of like always there. You just keep using it as much as you find valuable to work through any issue that you may be encountering in your own healing journey. And so that's kind of how that all came into being. So again, it's a very long answer, but I can't give it in a short one.
Very fascinating. Very, very much so. Mm-hmm. And so you have said, I read this quote earlier, one day I firmly believe that DNA is going to be understood as the quantum molecule.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, it ties in very well with what I'm saying. Like, I was once shown in another vision that this experience where it took place in the context of a past life regression. So I had gone for a past life regression session. And I had done this twice before, where I had conscious memories of past life experiences that I had lived. In this session, it was interesting because as the therapist was guiding me, I was in this realm where I couldn't seem to see any lifetime. I could see this kind of luminous being full of jewels, it looked like rubies and sapphires and all kinds of special light, and they were dressed that way, like a king or somebody who was royal, if you will. But I knew that it wasn't on the earth. And as I looked at this being, I thought, it's an aspect of me, but it's not a human expression of me. And then, like in the Russian dolls where there's a person inside the person, so from this being, there was a person came and landed on the earth. And that person was a very toned down version of the other person. So they had kind of the same colored suit on, but it wasn't bedazzled with jewels and fine, precious jewels and these kinds of things. It was a very mundane looking person. And then in the experience, I went from there. The therapist was saying, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm planning my next incarnation. And he said, well, what are you doing? He didn't quite know how to guide me because he had not really run into this, I guess, in his work. And he said, where do you want to go? And what eventually ended up happening, I won't go through all the details, but I ended up going back in consciousness to a place where I was pure consciousness, where I had no form. And I was looking at this courtyard, and in the courtyard, a double octahedron pyramid, a shell of light, came down and sat in the middle of the courtyard. And around the courtyard were all kinds of doorways. And I knew intuitively that behind any door, there would be what we would consider a lifetime. Like if I went through a door, I could have a past life memory, if you will. But instead of doing that, energy started coming through the door, through different doors. And there was all kinds of different energy that was flowing. And it flowed into this crystal form that I was seeing in the middle of the courtyard. And then like on Star Trek, when things move in hyperspace, this little crystal kind of shot through hyperspace, and it landed in a massive quartz crystal that felt like it was arriving on the earth. Okay, my intuition. The next thing I was shown was this shell of light and energy encasing, if you will, a developing fetus. And I knew that that baby was going to be carrying the energy that was coded in this crystalline structure. And that's the way I was shown that when we're born, we have DNA that comes from our mother and our father. There's a physical genetic component, but there's a field of energy that merges with a developing human that has a sacred connection. It's a divine spiritual connection. And as it merges with each one of us as a child, we carry that information as a quantum field of energy that's part of our DNA. When we go through life, we were limited in our access to the memory of who we were spiritually. Like most of us don't walk around knowing our 50 past lifetimes or these kinds of things. But we have an inkling that there's more to our reality than we know. And some of us have very conscious memories of our past lives. And the fact that there's a spiritual reality to life, if you will. And later in the vision, I was shown that now, for the first time, there was energy streaming down into that pyramid that normally would not have happened until this point in time when we're going through this awakening process that we talked about. And that people can begin to bring in new energy and new information into their reality that was not really even a possibility for most people up until this point in time. Mm-hmm. There were masters, I believe, who've lived on the planet and who've done this, but they were exceptional beings, and we've created religions around many of them, although there are many others who live very normal lives and, just had an incredibly spiritual quality, if you will, about their life and about their experience. But this is opening in a larger way, I believe, at this point in time, so that people can bring this kind of healing and this kind of transformation into the quantum field of energy that's really part of their own DNA structure. So that's the spiritual and the energy side of it. On the physics side, we're starting to understand that inside the atom, if you will, there's a whole quantum reality. And physicists talk about string theory and quantum energy and these types of things, and how there are dimensions or layers inside. And people who channel esoteric information talk about the 12 layers of consciousness that are part of the quantum field of DNA. So this is not something I've ever encountered in my own meditations or my own experience, but I have read about it from other people who have channeled information. And it resonates very deeply and very real with what I've lived in my own personal experiences. I think physics will, in the not too distant future, begin to have technology that can identify a quantum field. And when we do, we're going to begin to see DNA demonstrating these quantum attributes. Okay, things like entanglement or ordering of light fields that are based on the quantum patterning in the DNA. And there are some early scientific studies that have been done that show these things happen, how photons in a vacuum will organize around a DNA molecule if you put a physical DNA molecule inside the vacuum. And if you pattern water that contains DNA and you run a current through the water into a vial that has no DNA, the water that has no DNA in it can begin to create DNA molecules through reverse transcription, even though it doesn't contain DNA itself. Yeah. So there has to be some kind of an energy pattern that's transferred in order to make that possible. So these are kind of early demonstrations, I believe, of the quantum field of energy that's part of DNA. So from a very physics level, we'll begin to understand it elementary, but on a spiritual level, there's a very vast body of knowledge that I think will be part of that as well.
There was something you said in your book that I thought was pretty amazing. You said that science itself is a spiritual journey. That great scientists, when they made their amazing discoveries, it wasn't just through logic and reason, it was through like a moment of insight. Can you talk a little more about that?
I'd love to, yeah. Any scientist, I think probably the most famous example of this is Albert Einstein. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we recognize him as a genius in terms of physics and mathematics, and he brought so much knowledge and information that really didn't exist in a cohesive way on the planet before he lived. And so he brought a great gift of knowledge to us. But one of the things he said is, I've never made any discovery by logical thinking. Mm-hmm. He said, all of this knowledge came to me in moments of silence and moments of synchronous insight. And I forget his words exactly, but that's the message he conveyed. And if you talk to anybody who's ever involved in creative activities of any kind, where they're bringing something new or different, they'll all tell you, it happened one day. It's just one day I just knew. And then I had to set about figuring out how to manifest what I just knew. But it arrived all at once. It's like they knew it and they had to work it out. They had to figure it out, but they knew from an intuition or an insight that they had really been given the answer or the knowledge that they're looking for. Right. But it happens. I mean, it sounds wonderful when we think about it in terms of scientific endeavors and things like that, and it's great. The other thing I'd point out too is whenever something is about to arrive on the planet. So say, for example, we don't have planes, and then now we're going to go through a period of developing aviation and learning how to fly. Around the planet, there will be at least a dozen different people trying to do the same thing at that moment in time. And although no one ever did before, at that point in time, there are all kinds of people working on it, trying to make it happen. And there's a race, if you will, that tends to develop, and someone will win the race. They'll be the first to fly, or the Wright brothers in that case. And but there's a bigger consciousness at play. There's like information that's available, and you can tap into it, if you will. And if you do, you can bring in that information and the potential of that information in a more tangible way. And but it happens to us all the time in our lives. Like we're trying to solve problems, and we're focused on analyzing and thinking, and making charts and lists and comparing things, and all of a sudden you'll get to this place of just simply knowing. And you can do it at the beginning, or you can do it at the end of the rational process, but you'll get to a point where you just know. And for example, when you set out to create this online presentation, I bet if you go back to the moment it began, there was a moment in your life where all of a sudden you just knew in your heart this was the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can remember it.
There you go. See, isn't that great? That's amazing. And when we're really being guided, when we're really being prompted by our spirit, that's how it speaks to us. It happens kind of in an intuition, in a flash insight, or in a moment of knowing. And then we have to set about the more menial task, if you will, of making it happen in 3D.
Manifesting it all.
Exactly.
Definitely. And so what you just said about, for example, with the airplanes, all of a sudden there are all these people trying to create the flying machine. So that brings us to the idea of why it's a remarkable time to be alive right now. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think the most remarkable thing about this point in time is that people are beginning to internalize their spirituality. And traditionally, there have been lots of spiritual systems where we've had the force of life or the force of creation external to us. We saw us as a petty or dirty or meaningless kind of a civilization, and we had to work our way up the spiritual ladder in order to merit some kind of grace or well-being. And people are beginning to realize that the spirit they're seeking, that the consciousness they're seeking to attain is really inside of them. And with that, there's an awakening power, there's an awakening realization that we're conscious co-creators, that we can manifest spiritual change that's unprecedented when we tap into that power and that consciousness. And it's going to transform the planet. And I believe personally it's going to transform everything on the planet over the course of a couple of generations. So things that are very normal to us today, things that we almost consider normal human behavior, like if you look at business models and you think, well, corruption is just part of normal human behavior, that's going to change, because as people awaken to this innate spiritual consciousness, those things become unacceptable. And you just realize, I want to create a different world. I want to create a better world where the dignity and the integrity of a human being is honored for what it really represents. And that we see each other with those eyes, and that we learn to manifest compassion and kindness and potential in all the things that we invest our time and energy in. And that healing will be returned, I think, to a more sacred consciousness, where we'll understand that by investing energy of that nature and that caliber in the healing process, that we can restore balance into the human energy system. And by understanding that we're both spiritual and energy beings, we'll learn the fluidity of what to do to restore health in the body, rather than just treat diseases that seem to have, run out of control, and we don't know what to do except rage a war on them or attack them that way. And so there's a massive transformation that'll take place, and it'll touch everything. It'll touch health, it'll touch our relationships, it'll touch our families, it'll touch what it means in context to be a human being. And a whole new world is being born through this. And the magic of that is unbelievable. I don't think anybody knows what that'll look like, really. But it's nice to know it's coming.
Right, right. Really amazing. And as you talked about in the book, that shifting from where we're depending on these external sources like pharmaceuticals or, insurance companies to support us in healing. We have the power inside of ourselves to heal, and we can more and more take that responsibility upon ourselves to heal.
Absolutely.
Rather depending on somebody else.
Absolutely. And to be kind with ourselves in the transition. Like I always say to people, if you need different things like medications, for example, or healthcare that's very traditional in context as part of your healing process, don't turn away from it. Understand if it's really valuable, then use it. Use it to get well. But don't stop there. Connect with the power of healing that you have inside you, and connect with a consciousness that will support balance and well-being in all elements of your life. And you'll find a restorative way to heal in addition to getting over the health crises, if you will, or the disease of the moment. And that people will truly manifest unbelievable healing by doing that. And we're starting to see that now. People change their diets and they start to do certain kinds of exercise programs, and they heal from cholesterol issues, and they stop their medications, and they don't have high blood pressure, and these kinds of things. So we're at the infant stage, I guess, or the early stage of being able to see how true it is and how real that is.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, we are getting near the end of the interview time. So I do want to talk a little bit about your free gift that you're offering to the Summit audience. And so Dr. John is offering a sign-up promotional contest. So if you go to the Summit webpage for Dr. John Ryan, and you'll see a link there. You'll see information to click through to his website and various different items, but also for the free gift. So if you click there and sign up, 3 people will be selected to receive a free gift of the full package of the Unity Field Healing audio sessions. So that's incredible. Thank you so much for offering that.
It's really my pleasure. It really is.
Wonderful. And besides getting it as a free gift, how can someone access the audio sessions, if they want to go ahead and purchase them right away? So I want to reference that too. That a link to that will also be on the Summit website, as well as on your own website. So people will be able to access it either way that they want to.
Okay.
And do you want to talk a little bit? I know you already told us about that. The audio sessions. Is there anything else you want to say about it in reference to it being a free gift?
So, for people who are drawn to do it, there's a lot of information on the website. So if intuitively you feel this is something that would be right for you, you feel it would be a good experience for you, you're connected with it, I would say learn about it. And you can go to my website. At the top there are tabs. One is about the book, The Missing Pill. Another is on Unity Field Healing. So people can click into the Unity Field section. And some of the things I talked about today are there, in the description of the work and how the work came into being, what the sessions are like, all that type of thing. So there's pages of information that people can read and really connect with the work. To order the sessions, you can do it online, and I'll send you a package of links and then a download through Dropbox so that people can use the files in their own phones or on their computer or in any way you like to do audio or meditative work. And then the sessions are about 30 minutes each. So you sit and listen to the session, and then you go through the experience. Then you move on to session 2, and then you have session 3 available in the way that I described. So very easy if people are interested to access it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And it's been wonderful talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all this incredible information. Truly amazing.
Really my pleasure. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, and to all your listeners.
Yes. Thanks so much.
Thanks.